Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome back to another episode of the Shed Organics Show. My name is Jordan, and today's podcast episode, we are talking all things native bees. And in fact, not just native bees, we're talking all things about beneficial insects in general. We're talking all the way through to our European honeybees, talking about honey. We're even talking about the next generation of children learning about all of these things and the differences between where our upbringing might be in terms of how we best learn about these things and are exposed to nature in general. And Clancy has some amazing knowledge, a wealth of knowledge that he's already brought to the table in this conversation. And a really, really down to earth young bloke, actually, which is great to see because I'm hoping to promote more youth into talking about gardening and the wonders of nature. So it's awesome to see. He runs plenty of workshops and teaching so many people about various things to do with native bees and bee hotels and building their own and that sort of thing. He's got quite a few resources as well available, but I'll tell you a little bit more about all of that at the end. So if that's something that you're into and you're keen to stick around for the conversation, then sit back, relax, and here is Clancy from Bees and Blossoms.
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest things that made me sort of head down the direction of native bees is the fact that the average person just doesn't know that they even exist. Like if you ask, from a kid from primary school to someone going through high school to university to even some like grandpa walking down the street, if you ask them about native bees, like half the time they don't even know that native bees are a thing that
Yeah,
exist.
totally. I was in
And
that boat for
just
sure.
yeah, just the honeybee is like, or the European honeybees just dominates the sort of topic and gets a lot of the credit for for pollination and honey and everything that we love native bees and pollinators for. So that's why I love to advocate and preach for people to love native bees as much as they might love the European honeybees, and protect them as well because the biodiversity of bees is so important, so crucial for our ecosystems and for pollination, for our crops, for everything right across the board. So
Yeah.
important.
Very true, man. So, very well said. I think you're absolutely right because so many people kind of go, "Oh yeah, there's those other bees, eh? The ones that don't sting, or like the blah blah blah. Like there's these ones that don't produce as much honey. They kind of look like little flies, like all of this kind of thing." I'm like, yeah, they're native bees, and I was one of these people that only just figured out that,
Yeah.
these things exist and you can have them and they're great for pollination. They're not going to sting you, and they do provide some honey, albeit a little bit. So like, are you involved in helping people set them up at their places as well? Is this something that you try and promote people to have native bees? Because I'm certainly keen after finding out in the last couple of years. I think that's something that I would love to go down that road. So is that something you do, and how do you best help somebody who would want to go and get some native bees?
Yeah, so like you were just saying then about how there's native bees that like don't produce as much honey as the European bees, which can just pump it out by the liter.
Yeah,
There's also native bees that don't produce honey at all,
right.
uh, es- and especially in the area that aren't in within the tropics of Australia, because the native bees that we have in Australia, there's 11 species that make honey, and of these species, they all live either in the tropics or subtropics areas of Australia, so right across the top of the Northern Territory in Queensland, down the east coast to about Sydney. And so if you're outside these areas, it's likely that there's no native species that produce like the honey and
Wow.
live in the hives. Yeah, so that's what you said with me helping people set up native bees in their backyards and stuff. Particularly me being based out of Melbourne, the native bees that I help people set up in their gardens with creating the habitat and the nesting materials is for the native bees that actually don't make honey and the solitary species that don't live in hives and live together. And
Cool.
that's, yes, something that been doing only recently because I'm myself, as much as I want to say that I'm becoming a bit more of a on the expert side of bees and knowing a fair bit about them. I was in the similar position only a number of years ago. It's something that I've recently found out about as well.
That's amazing. Yeah. Well, everyone's got to start somewhere, don't they, man? So, that's wicked. I mean, I'm lucky enough to be in the subtropics in Brizzy, and I've seen quite a few people that do have the native bees that do produce honey, albeit probably maybe, I mean, you can probably correct me, but it's about a kilogram a year, I'm
Yep.
probably thinking. And most of the time I'm seeing people have their like split hives. So a hive will be split and then brought into their backyard or something, and then it sort of has to stay there for a while. And I want to talk about the process of moving hives as well, because apparently there's something to do with moving it a certain distance away. You can't just shift it from one side of your garden to another. If there's a few meters, they might all get confused and get lost. Maybe you can
Yep.
shed some light on that as well. But yeah, I've seen people just like splitting hives and kind of sharing them around. And I'm sure, obviously, there's being native bees, they would be out there in the ecosystem already, and it's just a matter of, like you say, maybe attracting them, providing habitat and flowers and food and water and all of this for them. What's the balance? Do you need to just go and get a split hive, or can you go out and attract them with homemade things and habitat?
Yeah, so for establishing a stingless bee colony, that de getting a split hive would definitely be the right way to go about it, unless you have some like really nice like hollow bearing trees which they would find in the natural environment, and that would be a good way to attract it. Or if I see there's people that go around rescuing colonies because some stingless bees love setting up in like those meter boxes in the ground because
Right.
there's like a nice little cube space for the Telstra boxes and the like water meter boxes and things.
Hmm.
So they're always getting rescued by people and put in those boxes. And there are some interesting things about when you are moving those around or setting them up, because if you're, like you said, if you're moving them around, you don't want to be doing that in the daytime
Mm.
because, like you said, they've got their own navigation systems and the way they recognize where their hives are. If you move it during the day when they've flown off, they're gonna have no idea. Even if you've moved it like not too far around the corner, they're gonna really struggle to find it. So
Wow.
what you want to do is if you are moving around the native beehives, do it at night once they've all um, once they've all ventured back into the hive for the night. Then you can sort of like maybe even put a little bit of duct tape over the entrance or something,
Mm.
and then yeah, move them at night. And then another thing you mentioned about moving them certain distances. This can be based on what species it is, because there's one species, Tetragonula carbonaria. This one looks like it's wearing a backpack. If you can see like the bee close up, they look like they're wearing a backpack
That's
because
awesome.
they're yeah because they're I think the thorax has like this big lump on it, and these are a species of stingless bees which are territorial, and so what happens with this species sometimes they can have like conflict between hives, and it's just a numbers game. So
Oh, wow.
one hive can go, yep, we're gonna fight this other hive, and it's just like one and one from each other. They just like grab onto each other and wrestle to the death. And there's like the winner just has the more workers,
Wow.
the more number. And so yeah, so sometimes so say you say you might split a hive or bring in a hive if it's within a few hundred meters of another Tetragonula carbonaria species, there's that chance that they will get territorial and fight each other.
Goodness me.
So
Right.
that's another thing to think about.
So is that's specific to that species solely? And you could probably go a different species that's probably a little more harmonious and not going to start fighting your neighbor's bees as well.
Yeah, so I'm not particularly an expert in like which species are territorial or not, but
Yeah.
I know that the Tetragonula carbonaria is one of like the ones that is like
Okay.
right, they just yeah,
That's cool.
real mean ones.
Do you do you have a recommendation as in like say for example for myself, let's use myself in the example. If I'm going to be heading out in the coming months to try and find somebody or a hive of some sort to be able to bring to my garden, am I looking for anything in particular? Am I looking for someone who's just says, I've got native honeybee hive, I can split it for you? Or are you looking for someone who's a little bit more specific into the species or whether their setup is decent or not? Or like what's the sort of things that I should be looking for in terms of like looking for a native honeybee hive to score?
Yeah, that's a good point because you want to make sure that one, the person that's splitting the hive is doing it correctly. So I know that up there there's a few experts that are up there. Like so, Tim Hurd is one of the really knowledgeable native bee stingless bee people up there who's behind
Awesome.
one of the he's worked on collaborating to create those nest boxes that you see. They're in the three components
Yeah.
that are specific for the native bees. So he'd be a great contact. Or there's also native bee associations. So
Mhm.
there's the Australian Native Bee Association, ANBA, and they have branches like around Australia. So reaching out to one of them to say like I'd love to have like a hive in my area. Or the other recommendation would be the people that are rescuing the
Mm.
stingless bees from like pits and drains and things, because then yeah, you've got the expertise and also the ethical um like capture of a hive
Yes.
behind it as well, because you don't want people that are going out into the wild and destroying a natural native beehive. It's particularly when there's
Mm.
the declines that we're seeing um in native bees and insects and things. So
Yes.
that's another important consideration. And because some people are paying like not for buying the stingless bee boxes themselves are expensive enough, but buying a functional one that's got a colony set up, people can charge a bit of like a top dollar
Right.
for keepers that want to have them in their gardens for sure. So there's a few important considerations with
Yeah, I like
before
that.
you get that.
That's cool because like as you say, there are so many groups and associations and well, just people on the ground that are dedicated to helping in all of these different areas and not just for bees, I suppose. So it does like it's very easy to reach out on something like Facebook where there's loads of community groups and things like this to find experts that can help you. Even through the
Yep.
gardening clubs and stuff like this that I'm involved in, there's people that so, someone knows someone who's involved in these groups and kind of is a bit of a local expert. So I'm going to write down those contacts. Thank you, man. I'm really keen to
Yeah.
jump into those. Um, you touched on like native bees sort of being like not necessarily endangered, but like we're seeing a decline or like a decline in our species or diversity of species and insects,
Yep.
beneficials, things like this. Can you talk a little bit on what that might be like down to and is there things we can do about it?
Yeah. So there's a number of threats that native bees and insects and all different pollinators and invertebrates in general are facing. Particularly in the last few decades, there's been some arising threats that have been more and more concerning. So one of the main ones, which is obvious and applies to a lot of different plants and animals, is just simply land clearing for agriculture that's happened for the last few hundred years, and more recently with urban expansion and housing developments going up all over the place.
Hmm.
We're seeing more and more land clearing of our remnant habitats for things like our pollinators, our plants, just all plants and animals in general. So that's as concerning as ever
Hmm.
currently with urban sprawl and cities expanding well past their metropolitan areas.
Yeah.
And then we've also had uh, agriculture and just the standard backyard practices of insecticides and
Mm.
pesticides and all different types of pollutants and chemicals that we're seeing, and it's been worrying in the last few decades because the technology and the quantities that have been employed to make the more efficient controlling of pests in agriculture. But these pesticides and insecticides, they don't discriminate by just the pests that they're designed to kill. They're obviously there's lots of things that are getting caught in the crossfire, and there's also multi-generational effects that we're seeing. So there might be ways that it's affecting the behavior of exposed insects and different things, as well as these pollutants getting into waterways and into
Yeah.
soils and contaminating different things that are causing, off-target, multi-generational or longer lasting impacts that might not necessarily being instantly killing the native bees and pollinators and other insects
Mm.
and microbes.
Yeah.
So pesticides is another one, and then another threat that we're seeing is through climate change. And
Mm.
so the warmer temperatures, which one thing, like the extreme weather events we're seeing with the crazy rainfalls, and we're going to be experiencing much more droughts as well in future, and more intense heat waves and these sorts of things. But we're also seeing just the change in the warmer weather, which is altering the thermal, like we're nearing the thermal limits of some species that
Right.
they're having to move to cooler areas or higher altitudes, or they're having to change their behaviors to adapt to the warmer weather. And another way that it's impacting our species indirectly is when the flowering times of particular flowering plants are changing because of the different climate patterns through warmer temperatures, which are maybe telling spring flowering plants that the end of winter is actually spring
Yeah.
because it's warmer at the end of winter, so things are flowering earlier. Then
So
there's
true.
also there's also the harsher climate, so limited rainfall might be prolonging the flowering of plants that are flowering in summer, that the energy demands and things that flowers take up might not be benefiting the species, so they hold
Yeah.
on to their flowers, so they're not flowering at all, or they're holding on for rainfall that's happening later. And so these effects of the when the flowers are flowering, and obviously there's important interactions between these flowering plants and the pollinators that have evolved to visiting them and relying on them. If there's a disruption in that interaction, then that can spell disaster for species, particularly specialists that might only have a number of species that they're specially designed to pollinating or collecting pollen from, or just they're one of their preferred resource plants. So we're seeing that threatening insects and pollinators and invertebrates as well.
That's crazy. I had honestly that sort of that idea of just the change in the seasons and how like the changing weather patterns and temperatures can affect the like obviously we see that in our crops, and I've spoken about that in length as to how certain crops will do really well in some years because of the season being kind of more designed to how it's used to it being, but then we might see some extremes where it's completely throwing it off. You might have a really ex long extended summer, for example, or same with the winter, and it's just throws these crops out of whack, and they don't understand kind of what time of year it is, and it does send like different signals out, and there's more pests because of it, or things like this. But it didn't really occur to me, honestly, that that would kind of happen with all of our beneficials as well. If they're coming around and looking for certain flowering species and they can't find it at the time of year, then they're going to have to adapt and go elsewhere, or migrate, or we're going to just see fewer numbers. So that's a really, really important point. And I suppose obviously we can all do our bit to reduce our footprint and reduce our impact on the environment. But also, I suppose people could be planting more of these things, make them more available, having more habitats and these kinds of things, and not deciding to build a huge real estate development in a natural
Yeah.
ecosystem, something like that. Is there any other things that you suggest to people to kind of do? And we'll kind of try and move this into where you're building these bee hotels in the workshops and things you do. So, what are the sort of things that you do to help people attract and keep and maintain all of the beneficials in their gardens?
Yeah, so yeah, one or some of these things too. They sound they sound pretty straightforward, like no-brainers, but it's still interesting to see
Yeah,
that what continues to happen and go on.
yeah.
Uh, but my I think my number one tip that I usually sort of preach about is if you want to attract native pollinators, the best thing you can do is plant native plants.
Mm,
And better still, if you can track down a local native nursery and get indigenous plants, like native plants that are, adapted to living in your area and will love your soils and will more likely have local pollinators that are designed to pollinating them. That's probably the number one thing you can do. Get those indigenous native plants and just create a haven for pollinators in your garden. Just go nuts, get a diversity of different species, different from different families as well, and then the colors and shapes of the flowers. So you're catering to a diversity of different insects and pollinators, and then also the different things as well for resources that are aside from pollen and nectar. So like native grasses are also important for like butterflies, which have host plants that the caterpillars
mm.
will grow up eating. And then like you've got your sort of aquatics, and it's good to have like plants for aquatic areas because then you're encouraging other pollinators and insects and invertebrates that will use those spaces and help with the soil quality and just the overall functioning of the ecosystem as well. And yeah, and having like those ground covers and trees and all different sorts of things that fill up those stratas in your garden that you can bring in the small birds and bring in all different sorts of things to your local ecosystem.
Yeah, that's really important, man. You're really right to be pointing out that couple of things, diversity, obviously, that's something that I'm on about all the time. But um, the second one being local and locally adapted native plants. Um, Myself personally, I kind of like speak a majority of the time about growing food crops and flowers and things like this. So natives kind of fall by the wayside in some of my content, but it's it's so important to have native species that are well adapted to your environment so that they are going to thrive, as you say, in the soils and contribute to that ecosystem that's already kind of been established here in or wherever you are in your ecosystem. It's already working for itself and it will attract the native plants will attract the native insects and then the whole ecosystem will work a little bit more cohesively. Is that something you talk about a lot in your workshops and kind of what else is something you kind of talk about and help people within the workshops that you run?
Yeah, so that's definitely a major part of it, talking about, the different plants, which are some of my favorites for encouraging pollinators. And then touching on what you were saying about food plants as well. One thing I like to incorporate into my workshops before I get into the bee hotels
Yeah.
and nesting material side of things is indigenous knowledge.
Mm,
And that ties in great with the food plants because if you walked through the bush with a First Nations person who's across all the ethnobotany, there's just a use for every plant. There's
mm,
medicines, there's foods, there's different ways for fibers and tools. There's
yeah,
just so many functions of native plants. And there is some really cool native bush foods as well that we can incorporate into our gardens. And so that's one thing I love to talk about
that's
and how
wonderful.
First Nations knowledge of the seasons, because like a lot of the people that would listen to this and we work off through our Western systems, we work off summer, autumn, winter, spring. But say like autumn, that season is the season we look around for for the leaves that are changing color. that's not really something that happens in Australian
No,
native plants.
no.
So that whole season itself is like a Western idea that,
Right.
when it switches from what's the first um s- what's the first month of autumn? Is it May? Is that March? Sorry, somewhere
Well,
between.
it depends when you classify it, but I would say it's probably March. Yeah, it's probably late
Yeah,
March.
yeah. So when but that's how we run off. We think, okay, yep, 1st of March, it's autumn now.
Yeah,
Like that,
exactly.
that's just the dumbest concept ever. Whereas the First Nations knowledge of the seasons is it's not defined by what day of year it is. It's when something starts to flower, or when some birds come in to nest, or when the eels start their migrations, or
Mm,
when the days and the nights become similar lengths, or when there's different things that are happening in the climate. Like, so the ways of using these environmental indicators to define our seasons is such a better system, and that's why I like
yeah.
to include into like my knowledge sharing, trying to encourage the the use of indigenous knowledge, and how we can incorporate that into our gardenings, and to our environmental uh
Yeah,
you
I
know
love that point, bro. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's it's about just being more aware of in the environment and being in tune with nature and its cycles. And like for instance, I can tell like you can tell certain seasons by looking at certain things. Like for example, when it's jacaranda season, when you start to see all the jacarandas flower, I'm like, oh, okay, I know that this kind of season has started to kick off. And like not everybody thinks like that, and I don't pride myself on being one that just looks and goes, oh, I noticed this migrating bird this month, but like I'm trying actively to be more like that. And I live in suburbia, so it's a little bit trickier than being out in the native bush, but it's something that we can all take a leaf out of for sure. So I really appreciate you sharing that, man. That's a really awesome tip.
yeah, it's absolutely unreal what you can learn from, because they say that being out in nature is like the classroom and country is the teacher. So like the
Mm,
connection that you have to your surroundings is like how you get informed by that connection to nature. And we are seeing such a disconnect in the modern generation and times with, our disconnect to nature. So it's such an important way of being aware of our surroundings and everything. And that's why I
yeah.
love to encourage that side of things for sure.
Yeah, cool, man. So that's really awesome. Tell me, yeah, let's move into your workshops. What content are you um sharing with people? What sort of where and when and what are you doing in your workshops and how do people sort of get involved with those types of things?
Yeah, so this is something that I do quite often, going into schools, um and because my sort of mission is with like what David Attenborough said about how if the next generation, if they don't know about nature and there is this disconnect, like who's going to look after it,
Mm,
so because they're our future, they're the future of the environment, and we need to inspire the next generation of nature lovers. So
100%.
that's one of the key areas where I focus these workshops, is aiming towards the next generation of nature lovers. So I love going to schools to run incursions of these workshops. So like currently I'm working at the Melbourne Zoo, and we're running a school holiday program to build the bee hotels and teach kids about pollinators and native bees, and building these bee hotels. You see the kids, they love it so much. Like they'll make the strings to hang them up, and they'll wear them around as like handbags or necklaces, or they're like they're telling people walking around the zoo like, oh look, I made this bee hotel, and people are like, oh yeah, awesome,
Yes.
mate.
That's so good.
um so that's one aspect that I love doing, but I've also go to like community groups, and there's friends for wildlife groups, and these are environmental collectives, and all different types of organizations, and people that I can connect with, and share knowledge and information about native bees and pollinators and different things. So it's pretty wide, and then obviously I try and share a lot online as well for free, with educational resources on my website about like my favorite plants for pollinators, and about a guide on how to build bee hotels yourself, and other different things and just random facts and
Yeah.
stuff that I share as well on theirs.
Oh, that's cool, man. I really back what you do. Like I said to you earlier, like upon finding your profile and seeing what you do, I really want to back and shine more lights on people like yourselves who are going out there and trying to inspire the next generation, but inspire anybody really, and kind of get excited about these types of things and share the knowledge. So it's really awesome to connect. Hopefully, we can connect when we're in the same state at some point.
Yep, that'd be
But
great.
yeah, yeah, definitely. So, one thing I had a question on before, you mentioned like um, sort of focusing on the kids, obviously, and trying to inspire in them some sort of, I guess, understanding of pollinators and this type of thing. Just out of curiosity and kind of a selfish question, what sort of age groups are you mostly finding are reciprocal with this type of thing or able to receive this type of information? Like, is there a bit of an age at sort of where the kids start to grasp it a little bit more than, say the younger ones? And then are you seeing a bit of a change in this kind of disconnect because you're coming up against kids that primarily maybe on screens quite a lot. They're inside probably more than they should be. I'm speaking very generally here, but this is the type of society that we're starting to see. Are you finding it difficult to kind of get across to some of these kids and their attention spans and this type of thing? What's your experience with working with kids in that regard?
Yeah, so there's quite a few parts to this question that I'll try and to include because like you said, there's age groups, there's like city versus country kids, and then there's also like the socioeconomics and like
Mm,
the different ways that kids learn as well at the particular schools that I'm at. One interesting thing I've found is that even the like, because I've even been to early learning centers and I've been blown away with just how young some of the kids can be and still take in and retain like some of the similar
amazing.
information I'd be sharing to much older kids.
Mm,
Um, and and like just soaking that up like a sponge. And then if I've gone back later on, and said like, what's something we learned when I was here last time or here before, and they've just like spitted out some of the stuff like
wow.
absolutely word for word that I was saying, and I was like super impressed. So I wouldn't even say that there's like sort of a minimum age group to
Cool.
the sort of information I've been sharing about native bees and pollinators. And obviously I can get a bit more, into depth with the older kids and like not be as surface level of knowledge. But
Hmm.
I've been super impressed with the sort of age ranges that these workshops can appear to.
Cool.
Another thing that with you say about the disconnect between the like the kids in right in the middle of suburbia versus outer, because I've also done some like regional schools because I'm from regional Victoria, so I've done a few around my hometown from like
Awesome.
teachers that have taught me that have been like, yeah, come out and teach kids out here, or just like family friends and things. I go to their schools.
Yeah, wicked.
And one thing I've found with, yeah, the country kids versus the city kids is one, the practical side of the country kids, like as in if I rock up to drills to a city school, the teachers are like, oh, put them away. Like, where's your health and safety? Where's your risk assessments? Where's this?
Yeah.
Where's that? And like, maybe not until the kids are like 15 and they've done all the woodworking courses and training and everything and then they'll be allowed to use like drills.
Yeah.
Whereas I rock up to a country kid school and I go, oh yeah, here's like, will the kids be all right to use like secateurs or something? And the teacher's like, yeah, yeah. They'll be like, oh, what else you got in there? Drills? Yeah, the kids, what, they're like eight, they're like 8 years old, they'll be fine. Like,
Yeah.
but there's like that sort of side of things that the country kids seem to be more hands-on and practical with their learnings.
Yeah.
But then when I flip that, I think that giving the city kids a chance to do something with their hands and like get involved in nature really like encourages the uptake and like the engagement in the activity, because they're like, we're
Mm,
used to being on our iPads, our computers, and they get this opportunity to build bee hotels or to plant native plants in the gardens outside, and they just go nuts because it's like this like novel experience for them. So there's
Mm,
like you sort of weigh that up. Um,
that's
and
super
then
interesting.
lastly with yeah, I've noticed that um there's different I've been to like lower opportunities schools that they might be more isolated or have bit of a barrier to having like guests like myself visit them and have those sort of opportunities which makes them sort of more grateful to hear from me
Mm,
as well. So I've noticed things like that. I've also noticed that there's yeah, so sometimes with like the ways of learnings when you go to like higher socioeconomic areas where the kids are like drilled to sit down, like good posture, no speaking for like an hour straight and not bat an eyelid,
mm,
versus you go to like some of the other schools where their way of learning is more practical, hands-on, or so like after that 15 minutes they're already like, can we do something or are we
yeah.
just going to yap the whole time? So there's that adaptability with the students. And but overall I find that kids just love the opportunity to have
Mm.
like to learn about nature and get outdoors, get practical, get hands-on. It's been really rewarding.
Cool, man. I can totally agree and see that. You seem like you're really kind of, yeah, taking in how these kids are learning. You're not like just applying a one size fits all to everybody. And yeah, that's really interesting insight just to kind of get an idea as to how it is. But you're seeing, like, as you say, kids that aren't exposed to growing up around agriculture, land, or just looking after the land, they're so like disconnected from that there's almost like a longing for it. So when there's somebody that comes along and is like, "Hey, like, look how exciting all of this is," they're like, "Oh my goodness, wow!" And they get some of that engagement or something that might be kind of missing for some of them. Um, so yeah, tip my hat to you, man. That's a really worthwhile thing, and I think you're doing a wonderful thing. Uh, let's go back to bees real quick.
Yep.
In terms of like, I guess the different varieties of bees, can we talk about honey a little bit? When when I'm looking for honey, I'm looking for um, I guess, raw honey, local honey, something that, and then obviously you get these people that can sell honey that has like a specific tree, or it like might be tea tree honey, or it might be, whatever it is, some sort of native, and that's because that's what's been around, that's what's been accessed, and it sort of draws that flavor in into the honey. Are you um do you have any sort of like anything to say on what people should be looking for in buying honey? And also, if they're wanting to say with any of our honey producing types of bees, if they're looking for certain flavors or certain plants and species to be around and available for that, how do you kind of guide them into choosing the right honey or trying to impact any of those types of decisions or choices?
Yep. So there's a couple parts to this one that's great. The first part that I love is yeah, things that are, locally sourced and produced honey. Because there is and I don't want to expose myself up to legality issues, but there is loopholes with how some of the companies will display on their things that might say like Australian honey, but that somehow they've like imported it and packaged it to be
Hmm.
able to like put that label on it. And one person who's been really good for calling that out is Simon from Save the Bees Australia. So he
Yes,
has
I've
this
seen his
social media,
videos
yeah,
about,
and
and he
his
picks all the brands up and shows you and
yep,
all of that. Yeah, I
and he
highly
calls he
recommend.
calls out, yep. So I'd recommend looking up him so then you can be discouraged by the brands that aren't
Yeah.
fully transparent about being Australian produced honey. And one of the interesting things you said about how some honey uh, that you can buy will say, this is Melaleuca honey, this is red gum honey, whatever.
Mm.
Some of those honey actually get tested to prove that they are actually getting the honey, the nectar
Wow.
and stuff for the honey collected from those species, because this is something that something similar with how I researched through my university studies, looking at the pollen, the different flowers that the stingless and other native bees collect their pollen from, is you can take the pollen from the bees, what they've carried it, and do DNA metabarcoding on that pollen. So you can, like, look at
Wow.
the DNA of each pollen, like pretty much each grain of pollen, and then trace that back to the species of flower that they've collected that pollen from.
Wow.
And so because bees have pollen, mixed in with the nectar and the honey when you're eating it, that they can actually go to the supermarket and go, oh, yep, they said this is red gum honey. Take the honey, take the pollen out of the honey, and then either do DNA on that pollen or get a specialist who looks at the grain of pollen under a microscope and compares that to a grain of pollen from, say, a
Wow.
red gum, if they say it's red gum, or the DNA of the pollen compared to the DNA of a red gum. And they can prove and test that that's actually like collected the pollen from
Goodness me.
that
Yeah.
honey
Well, that's
themselves.
good, I suppose, because then it kind of like makes sure that everybody's actually getting it from a good source. Um, but you're right about that. Like just choosing, like even in the soup, like I don't buy my honey from the supermarket, but if for those that do shop at supermarkets and things like this, having an informed choice as to which brands or where your honey's coming from, like makes a huge difference. I think even the difference between something like pure honey versus raw honey and like the benefits are so drastically different. Like from a local raw honey, you're getting local pollen, which helps you with local allergies and things like this. And it's all closely like it's not got loads of air miles, so it's stayed within the region. It's like yeah, you're just getting so much benefits of it being raw and as it was intended in nature versus something that's been pumped through machines, probably all different types of honey from all over the world, even sometimes, and mixed and batch mixed and added sugars and all sorts. Like it's just a world of difference between the two. And understanding like the labels and all of these types of things is drastically going to change your what quality of honey you're going to get. And I wanted to ask you about Manuka honey. Obviously, like I come from New Zealand. Manuka honey is massive in New Zealand, and originally we used to get like good quality Manuka honey over there, and now it seems to be a bit of a kind of trend to try and get some of these Manuka honey brands over here and things like that. Is this again something we're seeing that people are using that label to kind of amp up their
Mm.
products and it's not maybe as high quality as it could be, or do you have anything to say on Manuka?
Jump on the trend a bit. Yeah, that's not really something that I'm all that familiar with, to be honest with you, because I'm a massive I'm a massive fan of Manuka myself. So I'm probably one of the people contributing to them trying to jump on the bandwagon and get
No,
it
it's great honey. It's great.
commercialized in Australia. Yeah, but so I like your point before about the local stuff. So we could probably say, like, in a statement right here, the best honey you can get, go to a local market, find an 80-year-old bloke sitting in his deck chair with a white fold out table with his local honey. That's the spot that you need to be getting the best sort of honey from.
Yeah, totally agree, man. Totally agree. In fact, that's quite funny because that's pretty much exactly where I get mine from. That's
Yeah.
pretty much the setup.
Yeah, I love driving back when I go visit home in country Victoria. If you drive along the highway, they'll always, like, sometimes there'll be like stalls, and when there's a rest area or whatever, there'll be signs that say, like, pull over, I've got beef jerky, we've got honey, we've got sun-dried
Yes.
tomatoes, and I love pulling into those like little local
That's
stalls.
awesome.
That
I want to give a shout out. Actually, may as well do it now. That by the time this podcast episode is out, there'll be another guest episode that come out. She's created this app called U Forage. Not sure if you're aware of it, but essentially
okay.
it's a geolocate. I'm gonna butcher this explanation, but I'm gonna try my best.
Yep.
Geolocation style app where you can kind of go on and look around your area and search for things for local produce and road stalls and things like this. So it's a really good tool for somebody if they want local honey. They can go type in local honey, and then all of these like side of the road stalls or local vendors and people who are selling produce from their own homes or on the side of the roads, it will give you the location for that and a bit of pricing and how to get into that. So I just think it's a wicked idea that more people can access these types of things. So it goes hand in hand with trying to find that localized honey. So yeah, I'm a big fan of that one. Um,
I'll be downloading that the second that comes
yeah,
out. That sounds absolutely genius.
it's already out. As far as I know, yeah, I've been using it. So my dog's gone crazy. You can so yeah, you can basically download it, search up in your local area and it gives you the map and you can go and you can add products, you can have people that are searching for your products, you can give them little bits of prices, update it, all that kind of thing. And you can also if you find one, so like if you're driving along back home like you said to visit somebody and you find a stall that's always there and it's a great stall, you can like tag that location on the app
Yeah.
and then say, "Hey guys, look, found this." And then I think they can accept it as well and they can come and like do something about it too. So, yeah, highly recommend that one. Uh, let's finish up. I just want to kind of I don't I'm a bit conscious of keeping you for too long, man, but
Oh, I'm loving
let's
it here. I'd be able to speak forever. So
this
it's
is
good that
awesome.
you
Yeah. No, it's cool, man. It's nice to connect with you on this. Um, let's talk about I guess like so coming off this like the honey and creating honey and things like this and there is a difference between the European honeybee and the native species in terms of native honey. Um, can you tell me a little bit about the native bees that do produce honey? How to make sure that we're getting how do I make sure that the hive that I'm going to go and get is a native honeybee hive? I suppose asking the experts like we were speaking about earlier.
yeah.
Um, but like, what am I expecting from a native honeybee or native bee honey? Yeah, you know what I mean by that. What am I trying to expect in terms of how much? How do they store it the exact same? Is it still in frames? You have to pull out frames and things like this and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so there's interesting because there's different like variation within the hives of our native stingless bees or our native honeybee species. So there's 11 different species, and of those 11 species, there's two main genera. So there's Tetragonula and there's Austroplebia, and so there's slightly different structures in like the brood, and the way they store the honey as well, in their hives. And so they're going to be producing around, yeah, like you said earlier, around like 500 grams to about a kilo of honey per year. And was the rest of your question more around like how we're wanting to be establishing it and how what we want to be
Yeah, I
getting
guess
out of
so. My
the
questions tend to kind of just all merge into one of just a whole bunch of different things that I'm asking. But I guess like my my thought is kind of if somebody is thinking about getting native bees for honey as one of the benefits that they can get out of the native bees, how are they expected to manage it, to harvest it, and like and why? Oh, my that's another question. But why is it so slow compared to a European honeybee?
yeah, it's a slower process, mate. One of the reasons being due to the size of the bees themselves. So they're only like a maybe I think maybe 6 to 8 millimeters long compared to European honeybees that are probably double to triple the size of the stingless bees themselves. As well as the European honeybees will have just yeah like typically better resources from more productive areas, whereas the Australian landscape is typically got you know it's much harsher climate for most of Australia, so that the resources aren't particularly as good, and as well with the European honeybees tend to be active like right throughout the year, whereas the stingless bees are more so active in the warmer months. And obviously with the tropical conditions, it's a little bit more homeostatic. But
Hmm.
the idea behind it is having enough resources for them to last throughout the colder, less productive months.
Right.
So the stingless bees will um they'll produce like less brood, and they'll have like less workers and different things throughout those less productive months. So it's more like go go nuts, producing the honey to store it for the less productive months, and then they just sort of like taper off, um, and then they can survive on those resources and keep the hive ticking over until they're ready to like go nuts again. Whereas
Hmm.
European honeybees, they don't care about colder conditions. They don't care about different. They're just going full
Yeah.
circle all the time. Um, and in terms of looking after like the native beehives and like setting them up, establishing there's a few things to consider. So one of the things to consider is if you're like particularly in the warmer months, the stingless beehives, they can't really survive temperatures above, I think it's about 43 degrees.
Wow. Okay.
So if you've got the hive in an area of full sun, and the temperature forecast is, getting heat wave sort of proportions, like high 30s into the 40s, it might be a good idea to find a more shady area,
Hmm.
because that they can literally cook
Wow.
in the real hotter conditions. So that's an important consideration. And I think the another thing to consider, there's different things as well for maintaining the health of a native stingless beehive. There's different like parasites. So there's like flies that get in to the hives at times, and like lay their eggs, and like cause like rot and different things.
Mm.
So there are different ways, and I'm sure there'd be better people to speak on this than me, with like the sort of indicators to look out for with an unhealthy stingless bee colony, and trying to pick up these um like diseases or pests and parasites what in the early stages, so that it doesn't completely um ruin the colony. So
Yeah. I'm sure
I'd
that's a
say,
quite a huge rabbit hole of different things to
yeah.
be looking out for.
Yeah, so and that's probably the best thing you can do if you're looking into getting a hive, or you've already got a hive, would be scour these Facebook groups and these websites and educational pages for all this sort of information, and like get right down that rabbit hole for finding the real proper ways of establishing and looking after the native stingless beehives, because I wish they were in Melbourne, because if they were down here, I'd have one, and I'd be absolutely across all of the different things. But there's things that I'm still unaware of that might affect the health of a hive, and the ways of optimizing them in
Yeah.
like the tropical areas as well, because I'm not that familiar with tropical areas either. So
Yeah. That's fair. That's totally fair. Cool. Well, tell me, let's kind of wrap up with your favorite bee, and I know this can kind of probably be sometimes just like a little bit of a trivial question, but like, is there a reason why it's your favorite bee for having, or just because it's an interesting bee?
yeah, so I had this one in the chamber lined up when I thought this might be
Awesome.
one of the ones you'd send. So I'd love to share my screen and show you this
Yes,
species. If you
of course. There we go. Let's jump on. I'm keen as to see this, and if for those who
This was a
are,
good website I was
oh,
looking
look
for,
at
the
this.
Aussie Bee.
If for
This
those
is
who
a
are listening, this is it Aussie, what's the website, bro? What's it called?
oh this is
Aussiebee.com.au.
this is a great website about Australian bees that I was looking at before. There's lots, like top 10 questions about Australian stingless bee. They've got
Cool.
heaps of good information on here. And this was what I was going to show you,
Wow.
my favorite species of native bees. And there's a few things about these that I love. So
That's so gorgeous
these
looking.
are known as cuckoo bees. So there's blue spotted cuckoo bees. There's neon blue cuckoo bees. They're also known as cloak and dagger bees.
Fucking
And
dag.
like the name suggests, uh, if you've heard of cuckoo birds, or if you know what like someone who's a bit of a cloak and dagger or like backstabbing person, these these are like a bit of a bit of a prick in the bee world, but it's also why they're so interesting. So what these are known for is these are like kleptoparasites of the blue banded bee.
Oh, are they?
And so that's potentially why there's some similarities in the color and sizes
Mm.
of them. And so what these have evolved to doing is the blue banded bee, which is a ground nesting species of native bee, non-honey producing species. The blue banded bee will find a nice spot in a clay bank, in a nice clay soil area or sandy loam sort of area that they can dig a nest, dig a burrow, make these cells inside the nest, and then the blue banded bee will lay an egg. And then this is when bees are awesome pollinators. So to provide for that egg, to provision that they're going and collecting pollen and nectar from all different sorts of flowers. And they're making like a big stash of pollen and nectar for the egg that they've laid, and they'll seal off that hole or
Hmm.
that cell in the nest and make multiple of these. And what the cloak and dagger bee does, the Thyreus, they will sneak into the blue banded bee's nest, and they'll either sneak into the cell and lay an egg before the blue banded bee seals it off, or they'll like intrude into the cell, lay the egg, and then sneak off. And
Wow.
through millions of years of evolution, the egg from the cloak and dagger bee or the cuckoo bee will hatch before the blue banded bee and begin to eat the pollen and nectar, and so they will like the cloak and dagger bees will emerge instead of that blue banner bee's baby. So if you've seen the David Attenborough documentaries about the cuckoo birds where they'll lay an egg inside a another bird's nest, and that bird
Yes.
will raise their young. So this is like the similar theme. Um,
Wow.
and another interesting adaptation, I'm not sure if it's right across the genus, but they're also known for the larvae, or like when it's a little grub just emerged from the egg, the larvae of these have evolved like an overdeveloped jaw, so that if the blue banner bee hatches at a similar time and they're sort of competing, they go, yeah, well, perfect. I've got this big jaw, bang, and kill the blue banner bee larvae. So
My
like
goodness.
everything around about these depends on the blue banner bee and parasitizing them. And so like there's this age old like arms race between the cloak and dagger bee and the blue banner bee, um with with
Wow.
like trying to camouflage the nest better or being more defensive to keep them out. And then these are more adapted to like the eggs hatching earlier and having the larger mandibles.
That's
So
incredible.
like there's this awesome interaction, and obviously blue banner bees are like the favorite bee of so many people.
Hmm.
So I take the other approach and
Yeah. Well, they do kind of look a bit similar. Like for those that aren't watching this, I highly suggest you do go over and watch it. But they are very similar, obviously for maybe for that adaptation reason and why they've kind of there you go. Yeah. So that's the
so
blue
these are
band of
the
me.
blue banner bees that they parasitize. So
Wow. Yeah, so that's incredible that they do that. And like, you know, these types of things where there is like this kind of battle between species, I find that, it's like almost like how in certain instances, maybe in sports or something, we might have like this arch rival that kind of like pushes us and kind of this develops the stress between the two battling makes each other better. I don't know whether that happens in this instance, but the two need each other to survive type thing. So maybe
yeah,
not the blue banded bee might
yeah
not need them,
they do
but
make each other better,
yeah,
because
that
the blue banner bees that survive are fitter and stronger or more camouflaged or better at hiding their nest or better at fighting them off. Like
wow,
so, it's an interesting
man,
interaction and
that's so
one I'd love
cool.
to highlight. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you did. So that website as well is really, really good. Where can we find you? Where's best to come and look at all your stuff? You've got your website, Bees and Blossoms, is that right?
Yeah, so I've got like a social media presence. So here's like
Yes, awesome.
this is me on social media.
Yeah,
And
beautiful.
then yeah, so shout out to my Bees and Blossom social media, and then I've also got on my website. So this is like when I was talking before about the my favorite plants. I've got
Yeah,
like these educational resources, like what lives in bee hotels, how to make bee hotels the best plants.
that's
Um,
wicked. I'm gonna definitely be
yeah,
looking all this up. So this is nativebeehotels.com.
yep,
Amazing.
yep.
Well, I'm gonna throw
Got
all
some
of the links
information on
down
that.
below anyway. Um, But bro, I think that's a wonderful place to wrap up. I
Yep,
think I like as you said, I could chat to you for hours, man. You're a really fascinating bloke, and I really appreciate
this
your
has been
time.
great.
All right, there we have it. What a wonderful conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed Clancy's company today and learning about all of these things to do with native bees. I'm certainly going to be checking out his links, which, as I said, will be in the description below. So you know what to do. Go and click on those links. Go and give him a follow and do some study. See if you can read up a little bit more about how you can best help your garden to be more attractive to those beneficials and to have some of our native species, native knowledge, and then eventually, a native ecosystem. So that's something that I'm really going to be focusing on myself, and I highly encourage you to do the same. Now, if you haven't already, please feel free to go and leave this show a review. It really, really helps us to find more listeners, to bring more value to more people, and ultimately inspire more people to get out into nature and into the garden. So, a review on any of the platforms would be absolutely amazing. And also, we've got our organic growers guides. We've got the beginner one that is out for free, and you can get started with organic gardening on the website. The link is in the description. You can also now get yourself the intermediate guide, which is a step up and a little bit more detail into exactly how we can help our gardens thrive organically. So if that sounds like something you might be interested in, then I highly encourage you to go and check out the links, as I said, that are below in the description. So that's it from me. I hope you've enjoyed the episode, and I very much look forward to seeing you on the next one. Take care.